would love to talk about liberation theology and social justice movement, because I did not know until you just told me how the Black church and the radical tradition of the Black church used to be core curriculum. And that's no longer the case. And that's fascinating to me because I didn't realize, well, first of all, you know, Moral Monday movement was really like my entry to good trouble to begin with.
That was an interesting time.
And it was fascinating to me to discover how many people are not familiar, in my generation, are not familiar with Black liberation theology, are not really like familiar with that history. And I did not know that that used to be core curriculum and that now has been taken out. And so I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that in this moment, because I think that you are obviously like one of the most prominent people in the country who's still operating in that tradition at a time where there don't seem to be as many. Am I wrong in that? In my perception,
No,
it doesn't seem like there's as many.
Well, you know, you're pretty perceptive, Bree, so I'm not the last one to tell you. I mean, and first of all, let me just thank you. You know, I owe your family so much. I'm trying to do this without tearing up, but you know, your father, when I lost my father, your father took me under his wing when I was at Duke. And if it wasn't for him and Dr. Turner, I might not be the person I am. I thought about leaving ministry. I went to Duke, and on one occasion I was asked, when I raised the question about a grade I'd made, did I get a C? Because I knew I had done the work. I graduated from North Carolina Central University, one of the strongest colleges anywhere. And the response was, well, that's good enough for you. And I mean, what did you mean? And it was kind of a suggestion, it wasn't overt, that since I had graduated from HBCU and I was not Duke Divinity School, that if I made a C or C+, and my response was, but I was not born to live at sea level. I lost my father toward the end of my seminary career. But your father, when I was struggling at Central about my calling, and I had gone there to go to law school and was really wrestling with ministry and wrestling with how to deal with it, because even in the church, sometimes my father's commitment to social justice and what he faced in the Black church, a resistance to it, had me really struggling. And your father, when I met with him, in fact, if he had not recruited me and helped me get at Duke, I might not have been available when my father had his first series of strokes, because I was thinking about going to Boston, And he and Dr. Turner really mentored me and pushed me hard, hard. But it was so I could grow. I mean, they didn't just, I had to work for grades, right? And they made me read stuff I didn't want to read and study stuff I didn't always want to study. And sometimes I can remember when people used to talk about both of them because they were tough. And sometimes students, even Black students, would say, well, but you don't want to take that class because they're so hard. No. And so I can't apologize for my tears, but I just wanted you to know that.
Yeah.
Now, it was your father's generation that fought at Duke that said, you cannot be a seminary in the South and talk about Christianity in America without having a core curriculum course that every person has to take regardless of their race, their creed, their color, in order to graduate from here that focuses on black religion, black radicalism. And that's not even just the liberation theology, just focusing on basic Orthodox Christianity that says there's no way you can claim spirituality and not be about the business of justice. You know, Dr. Turner taught us in his course, you can make any claims you want to about faith. You can say you were baptized, sprinkled, born again, fire baptized, but if it doesn't produce a quarrel with the world's injustices, then it's terribly suspect. I remember when your father talked to us and told us the religious story of Mary McLeod Bethune. He wrote on that, his dissertation, but he told us how she had this immaculate conception, but the immaculate conception was that she had been born to birth possibility for other black folk. And he talked about that as a religious experience. She wasn't a minister, but she was a theologian. She was a practical theologian. So it is concerning to me when I hear there are some HBCUs you're not required to take Black history as a matter of core curriculum. You can't graduate from here. And so at Duke, from what I understand now, what used to be a core course is more optional. And you can take one of several courses, but when I was coming through, the activists out of the 60s and the 70s had said to this seminary, you cannot be true theologically if you don't address the specific critique that African Americans brought from the motherland here to Western Christianity as both a challenge to that and sometimes as a way of calling what C.H. Lincoln called Americanity a form of heresy. And so it does concern me.
So in my view, I really question, can there be political transformation in America without spiritual transformation? And to me, when I say spiritual transformation, it's not about like religion, right? It's about like what is the spirit that's coming? What is the energy? And so I find it really interesting that doesn't seem to be as much of a central issue. And I'm talking about kind of more my generation of folks. I feel like there's a lot of theory, there's a lot of political analysis, there's a lot of talking about structures, right? But in terms of like what you're talking about, that crucial history of the experience of Africans in America, the spiritual dynamics of a struggle against oppression.
The moral, and it's always been there. I mean, it's old, but there's always been this tension, and there's always been a need. You look at the white and black abolitionists of the Jim Crow prior to the end of slavery, prior to Civil War, and then during the Reconstruction movement. They had a very moral framework. They didn't do things because they were Democrats or Republicans or part of the Know Nothing Party or part of the Whig Party or whatnot. They said, wait a minute, this is what we said on paper. This is what you claim to be. These are our deepest spiritual values, say that to be a moral person, you have to be concerned about love, justice, and truth. To be true to the Constitution, even before the 14th Amendment, equal protection under law, you said establishing justice. That's what you said. That's a moral principle. So we're going to examine everything underneath that framework. Now, it was always a tension. It was a tension. I often remember the story when I think it was Frederick Douglass was thinking about quitting one day. And Sojourner Truth says, the story goes, I think the story, she saw her friend with his head in his hand, and the story goes that she hollered across the room, "Is God dead?" And Frederick Douglass said, shook him to the point that then he could go to the podium, right, and lay out the policies and the structure. But he had to be reminded that this was bigger than just a personal struggle or a political struggle. This was a struggle of the soul, in the midst of the soul of the nation. And if we look at racism, Tahisha Coates says that race is the child of systemic racism. And systemic racism as a policy was born out of a need to keep white and black people from working together, particularly out in the South. So the slave codes of the 1700s were developed to create race as a way of saying all of these citizenship rights are open to you, except if you're this color, to create a distinction, right, between race, white folk and black folk, because of the fear of something like the Bacon's Rebellion happening again. Because so and in the midst of all that, Bree, you have if you look at it closely, I often say that there are 5 parts, 5 foundations underneath the structure of racism, systemic racism. And the first one is evil economics. And evil economics is when the end justifies the means. So if your end goal is to be a country that exceeds other countries in the world that existed prior to you, but you want to get ahead of them economically, and if the way to do that is to have indentured servants that are white, but then if that doesn't work, if the way to do that is to steal the Native Americans' land, and if that doesn't work, the way to do it is to enslave black people. The end justifies me. That's evil economics. Then the second one is sick sociology, that you have to have a hierarchy, right? That you got to have a hierarchy. It's sick, but it has to exist. And then the third thing is bad biology. Cornel West talks about in his book, Prophesied Deliverance, that actually I was introduced to in your daddy's class, Prophesied Deliverance, where he said the humanity of the black people is a recent consideration. And then he lays out how there was this whole attempt with these scientists to suggest that brain size was connected to skin color. So that's bad biology. But then you have political pathology, where, as I think it was John Chapman said, even sitting down, they sat at the constitutional table to write the Constitution. He said racism and slavery was under the table like a coiled snake. Right underneath the table. So that's political pathology, when everything you do politically is going to be determined first and foremost by how do we keep these folk down, or how do we keep them as close to slavery as possible. But then the last piece that kind of wraps it all up is heretical ontology. God intended it. That's the greatest heresy. That God intended the evil economics. That God intended the bad biology and the sick sociology and the political pathology. And that's why racism is not just a political consideration, but a religion. A bad religion. That's why they used to say, have you got good religion? See, that was the song of the church. Have you got good religion? Because President Douglas said, because I love the Christianity of Jesus, I have to hate the religion of the slave master. And what we've had is, through the years, a constant rebirthing of that bad religion. And only good religion, whether it was embraced by white folk or the black church or the social gospel movement where primarily white people led, it was always attempts to undermine that bad religion.
That's one of the things I've repeatedly raised with people, is that white supremacy, it's not just an ideology, it's a theology. It's like a whole, and it's so pervasive that people don't even have to be conscious of it. There are people who identify as atheists that are subscribing to white supremacist theology and don't even think about it, right? So I'm curious as to know, what is your take on the state of things, period? Like, you have described this era as the third Reconstruction. I heard you say that, and the more I see and the more I study, the more I understand what that means and how true that is. And so I'm just kind of curious, how do you define progress? Are we making progress? What does it mean that we keep going through this same cycle of trying to make America be what it is? We're fighting for the same things that they were fighting for in the aftermath of the Civil War. The same dynamics, right? Maybe the party switched, so now it's the Republicans, right? Trying to hold things back instead of the Democrats, but we're still basically in the same political position, trying to build these fusion movements, trying to, fight for voting rights. My first entry to, where I really started identifying as a conscious activist was the voting rights fight here in North Carolina in 2013. And that was part of what really shook me into getting involved, was just my shock. Because I thought all that was,
we done that.
That was done. I grew up in a time where it was kind of like, people fought and they died, and now we have the right to vote, and we have the Voting Rights Act, and that was supposed to be something that was secure. And so how do you define progress, right? When you have this dynamic where we keep this is the third Reconstruction. So this is like at least the third time that we have tried to take a stab at this American project, still find ourselves dealing with the same basic issues, voting, housing, education, racism. What's your take on the state of things right now? Are we making progress? Is there such a thing?
I think so. I think it can be both. I think you can make progress and fight retrogression and fight stagnation. I think there are those that want to retrogress. I mean, when we began the movement together against a bill that would later be called surgical racism with surgical precision, the worst voter suppression bill since Shelby, since the Shelby decision in 2013. Remember, all that year before that, that same legislature had gone after gay people, had gone after Latinos, had gone after public education, had blocked unemployment, had stopped health care, even health care that was going to help 340,000 white people. And then they decided, oh, we'll pass a voter suppression bill. Now, I don't know if people remember, Bree, but it was during Holy Week or right before when that bill came out of the Senate, and it was Senate Bill 666. They tabled that bill. And then they passed a bill in the House called House Bill 587 that was the photo ID bill, and then they tabled that. Then they waited till after the Supreme Court decision, and then one of the senators said, now that the headache has been removed. And that's when they put all the voter suppression pieces. And that's when, we started, we'd actually started before the Moral Monday movement, then it intensified, and the legal cases and so forth and so on. But I never thought I would be in a position where 1,200 people would have to be arrested in North Carolina. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at this board right now, and it says that it was in 1958 when Dr. King first came to Raleigh. But it also says he came to North Carolina State in 1966, and the same day the Klan March. And then I'm thinking about in 2013, 14, and 15, but our fight was this. We weren't fighting to win voting rights. We were fighting to hold on to them. To hold on to it, Because the lawyers of that case, remember, they went into court and argued that because the Voting Rights Act had been gutted, they could retrogress. Not only were we fighting to hold on, our lawsuit had to include white women, had to include Latinos, had to include, because the laws they were putting on the books was going to have a disparate impact, not just toward black people, but toward white people and older people and young people. So I think that we have progress, but listen, every generation, a friend of mine says, is going to have its Edmund Pettus Bridge. Let's just go ahead and settle on that. Every generation is going to have its battle with injustice. Every generation is going to have its battle with those that would rather go backwards than go forward. So maybe what we do is we suit up.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
One of the narratives that kind of concerns me is when people do act like, oh, well, all we have to do is the memorial march across Edmund Pettus Bridge. We're just going to remember the fight. And people act like it's not over. Like, what are we memorializing?
I don't even think we should do.
Yeah.
I actually said they got mad at me. I said, I don't think you go out. First of all, let's remember that history. It wasn't everybody that marched.
Right.
Let's stop false remembering, revisionist history.
Right.
Dr. King oftentimes said that part of the problem he had was all of the people that wouldn't stand up.
Right.
He said that. I mean, I was just in Birmingham at the going to Bessemer, where they're fighting now for union rights against Amazon, and they're fighting against vote rights, same people, black and white. But I was at the 16th Street Baptist Church, and I was reminded when he did the funeral of Adam A. Robinson, Dr. King said, these children speak to us even in their graves. They speak to, and he said, white racists who doing so and so. They also speak to black preachers who are not doing such. I mean, even then he was saying, look, it's not everybody, it's a remnant that's making it better for the whole. So let's remember Selma and Montgomery. Oh, today is the day. Today that we're doing this interview is the actual day that they would have gotten to Montgomery. Think about that. I just thought about that. Today, as we're talking, today, the 25th of March, is the day they would have walked into Montgomery.
Wow.
And 25,000 people heard Dr. King say, how long, not long. And guess what he did that day? That day in that speech, which I consider his greatest sermon, I think I Have Dreams his greatest closing, but I think in some way his greatest sermon and teaching was the speech after Selma, because he connected the 19th century, the populist movement that brought black and white people together. And then he said that the fight against voters' rights was also a fight against the Negro and white masses of poor, low-wealth people coming together.
Yeah.
Now think about it. 56 years ago, who was there with him? A young John Lewis and a King. Here we are. I'm just saying. And today, what are we fighting? We're fighting for living wages, which was actually a part of the agenda of the March on Washington.
Right, they cut that out.
They got cut out.
Right.
By us.
Right.
By black folk.
Yeah.
By black organizations that did not want to be as radical as A. Philip Randolph and Dr. King and Bayard Rustin, right?
Yeah.
And so then you get to today we're fighting, we just had a fight where there was a blocking of living wages, which would have lifted 45% of black people, working black people, out of poverty wages. And yet, interestingly enough, that argument wasn't also framed as a form of racism. When those 49 Republicans, 1 black, 8 white Democratic senators, 5 white men, 3 white women voted down $15 a union being a part, they were saying no to 45% of black working people.
Right.
And be quite honest, there was even some mutedness among black organizations.
Always.
But now we have, everybody's fighting about, we got to get the, House Bill 1 passed, democracy. Now we're framing that as just a black issue.
Right.
When it's not just a black issue.
Right.
The fight for voting rights, as Dr. King said in 65, the fight against it has always been, how did he say it? He said the Bourbon and Southern aristocracy intentionally sowed division because of their fear of a black-white coalition that would fundamentally restructure America's political architecture and bring into existence a world and a state, a country that would address poverty.
Yeah.
Right. So progress, yes. Progress finished, no. Do we have to keep fighting? Yes. Why? Because there are 5 interlocking injustices.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you a question, and I want to see what you think about this. What we're saying in the Poor People's Campaign is that there are 5 interlocking injustices, right? They're like this. You can't just address one. Like, you can't just give temporary child tax credits and say you dealt with poverty.
Right.
Right. So I'm going to ask you, here's the 5. I want you to push back or push up or however. The first one is systemic racism. We say that's interlocking. Now, systemic racism for us is not just somebody calling you the N-word. It's policy racism toward black, brown, indigenous, Asian people. The second is systemic poverty, which is, before the pandemic, 140 million poor and low-wealth people in this country. 43% of this country poor and low-wealth before the pandemic. The third is ecological devastation / the denial of health care. The fourth one is the war economy, where you spend $800 billion into the war economy, 53 cents of every discretionary dollar, only 16 cents of every discretionary dollar to education, health care, wages, whatever. And then the last one is the false moral narrative of religious nationalism that says if you're anti-gay, anti-women's right to choose, suggest that Jesus was a founding member of the NRA, pro-tax cut, and pro-republic. That's a godly position. Our argument is that those 5 interlocking injustices are still with us, and we have to battle together again. What do you think?
I mean, I completely agree. I 1,000% agree with that. And I think that, again, in my view, I would classify all of those things under white supremacy.
Okay.
Right? Like when we talk about what all of those things are, if white supremacy were like this umbrella and we were going to break down like what were all those different components, those are all of the different components. In my mind, I feel like the greatest revelations for me since becoming involved, like a conscious activist in, in this moment, was one, realizing that the 60s civil rights movement was trying to achieve what was supposed to have been granted in Reconstruction.
That's right.
That really blew my mind because I felt like a lot of the education, I felt like my generation has been largely miseducated, quite frankly. First of all, we haven't been educated at all on the first Reconstruction for the most part. Like the narrative we get is, we were enslaved and then, we got, Lincoln set us free. Right. And then we just couldn't get it together for some time, and then Martin Luther King came along and Rosa Parks came along and we have the right to vote now. So if we can't get it together now, it's because there's something we're not doing right. Right. And I think the biggest revelations to me have been that the fact that we are still fighting for rights we were supposed to get like 150 plus years ago. And also the fact what you were touching on before, that it's always been a minority of people. This idea that everybody marched with Martin Luther King Jr., right? And I think what made that so clear to me was when I looked up and realized we're still fighting for the same things.
That's right.
And a lot of these people who are commemorating the past are not showing up. Like, I'm not surprised that you get pushed back today, right? Because the same dynamic that led people in the 60s to not want to talk about living wages and racism,
That's right.
I think is the same dynamic that we are confronting today. And it's like, when we talk about white supremacy, folks want to tackle just like a little bit of it.
A little bit. And as you said, they don't want to, when you said that, a lot of people miss it. She's saying it's all white supremacy. But hear what Bree, I think, is saying, is that you cannot understand any of this stuff without understanding how it connects to white supremacy.
Exactly.
Because white supremacy ain't just about hurting black folk.
Right.
It's about a certain group of folk doing whatever they can to keep the coalitions from being built that will fundamentally undermine that supremacy.
See, in my view, I think white supremacy, that theology, that idea that God is white, and and this is the natural order of everything, that last part that you named, that's what upholds everything else. So people living in poverty is acceptable because this is what God made it to be, right?
That's right.
The war economy is acceptable because this is what God made it to be. Because if you let go of the idea that white supremacy is the natural order or theological order of the universe, then you have to confront that these are systems.
You gotta confront it.
Right?
You gotta say this that was created, for my term, sin.
Yeah.
And you got to deal with it. It's injustice. It's wrong.
Right.
I'm reading again this. For those of us who were white, it was the frightening because there were people who thought the worst thing a person could do was to support black people.
Right.
You think about that's a 60 statement from but this business of supremacy.
Yeah.
I was sharing with somebody the other day, Bree. I said, I wish somebody would stand up and I try to do it. That say that voter suppression is idolatry. I said, what are you talking about? I said, well, think about it. Our Constitution says we only grant the right to vote to people, not pets, parakeets, and puppies. People. So if you suppress my right to vote, bad English, good theology, you're saying I ain't a people.
Right. Right.
I'm not created in the image of God.
Right.
And you therefore have a right. So it's idolatry, it's self-worship, it's a form. And so the battle against voter suppression is a political, spiritual, social, economic battle.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's important for us to understand. I just left Bessemer, as I told you, on the other side of Birmingham, where 6,000 people are playing in Amazon. It's 5,500 black people, 500 white people, and others. 56 years after Selma, they don't have contracts. 56 years after Selma, they are working at will. 56 years after Selma, they don't have guaranteed health care. 20,000 people have been infected by COVID in Amazon plant. Jeff Bezos made $189 billion last year.
I saw where they said he could afford to pay every single employee at Amazon over $100,000, and he'd still have more money than he did a year ago.
And growing.
Yeah.
Now watch this though. We're down there in Bessemer, black and white people organizing, right? These young, and many of them young folk. They're standing up. They're still using the tactics, the police coming out to intimidate them, that were used similarly by Jim Clark. Inside the plant, they're using tactics. They have a class on unions, and when they teach the class, if the workers disagree with the lies they tell, they make them come to the front of the class and take their picture. And take a picture back. But watch this. And because, see, what you just said is, yes, down through the years, we end up fighting for what we thought we fought for before, but always somebody compromised it. Always somebody filibustered. That's what I like about the young folk today. That's why my knees might hurt, but I love being around y'all. Because y'all like, we ain't got to ask nobody permission for full justice.
Yeah.
But here's the point I'm making. So, I was with the workers and they said, Reverend Bob, we got a question to ask you. Said Jeff Bezos last summer said he was gonna give $10 million chump change to some black organizations. And they listed him. And they said, and he says he loves Black Lives Matter. But inside the plan, Black lives don't have health care. Black lives are dying.
Right.
Now, why is it that the organizations aren't coming clean? They said, why don't they just say, we're gonna give you back the money because you lied. You don't really concern about black. In the middle of COVID, he cut the workers' hazard pay and increased their time to work. And then I started remembering how, and there were those that, when Dr. King, pushed by the welfare rights women, the women now, they were the ones that pushed him into the Poor People's Campaign. And the day he came out, April 4th, and connected poverty, racism, militarism, and started talking about organizing white folk in Appalachia and black folk in Alabama, almost every civil rights organization wrote a resolution against him. He lost his open invitation to the White House. 160 newspapers wrote articles against him, including some black ones. If we don't tell this history, we got to tell it tall, as Grandma say, and try not to make the same mistakes. I was reading Alicia last night, Garcia, I was reading, and it was about, she said, how many people told Black Lives Matter go home? And how many people would be in jail, but nobody, if they had go home, but they said, we don't have to ask permission. I remember when you went up, I was sitting there, and you know, of course, I tell you the story, I don't know if I ever told you. So here you are going up the flagpole. By the way, y'all, I'm just stretching my knee. You should know I mean, first of all, how she get up the flagpole like that? But you went up the flagpole, and you did what should have been done 100 years before you were born. And your father called me, and he was concerned. And I kind of said back to him, well, you taught her. I said, you the one got both of us in trouble. You got me
Right.
So no need to be all concerned. We just need to figure out how to deal with it. Right. But I thought about, you didn't have to ask permission. You said, let me show you how easy this is. Now, what was interesting though, they charge you, they put it back up, and the governor doesn't decide to bring it down until after the killings. But the bill that was written, there were some of us that were saying, don't just let it be a bill against the flag, let's go after racism. Let's make it a bill to fully fund public education in South Carolina, a bill to stop voter suppression. And some folks told us, no, let's just do the flag right now. Listen, let's just do, I ain't talking about white folk now, let's just do the flag. And I thought about that and said, you know, this governor has just shown us that only black death matters. And then it only matters to some folk by their own determination of how much it's worth.
Yeah.
And in her mind, black death was only worth one dead flag coming down.
Yeah. Well, see, I feel like that is a consistent pattern, right?
Yeah.
So, and you just mapped it out perfectly. That's what we run into. So we're talking about black life, right?
Black life, right.
We're talking about we want to preserve black life.
Right.
We want to ensure every black child has a future. We go through all of these different things, list them all. And that's where we get the pushback. The state says, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to fund education. We don't want to fund healthcare. We don't want to fund living wages. We don't want to solve policing. What we will do is cut a check to the family every time a police officer gets killed. What we will do is, maybe take down this Confederate monument. But whatever it is, it's never in the interest of life. And I was actually thinking about that this week. I was just thinking how this society, and I just mean just broadly, like America, traditional America, I don't know if the word is I don't know if it's necrophilic, I don't know what the word is, but it is a death. It is
necrosis.
Yeah.
A slow death.
Yeah, it is. And that's what everything seems to be organized around. It's not about preserving life.
Well, I preached a sermon last year at the National Cathedral entitled, America Must Decide That Death is No Longer an Option.
Yeah.
And I did this piece on George Floyd and said when he said he couldn't breathe, what grabbed people, I think, was not only the video, but the fact that his I can't breathe was like shorthand for how a lot of people are feeling.
Oh, yeah.
I can't breathe because I don't have any health care. I can't breathe because I'm dying. Before COVID, 750 people died every day from poverty, 250,000 people. 7 people died from vaping. We had a congressional hearing at White House. 250,000 people died from poverty before COVID. And I said that, but what we've got to do is, as gruesome, as ugly, as hateful, all the synonyms, all the descriptive terms I could use, to see someone with a knee on their neck, murdered, lynched right in front of you, our analysis of what causes death must even go deeper. Because there's a death that comes from the denial of health care, a real death in dying. There's a death because of poverty. There's a death when you block education. There's a death. And what we have to do, I think, in this moment together is expose what I call the DM on the DL, the death measurement on the down low. So if we're gonna have a conversation about death, let's have it.
Yeah.
Because every piece of regressive public policy down through American history has always had a death measurement connected to it. And we've got to, if we're gonna have this conversation about life, then we have to be just as concerned when we see it on camera in front of us as we do when we don't see it on camera, but we get the statistics.
And see, that's what I feel like. I don't know if it's that people really don't have that analysis or if folks are willfully ignorant, just don't want to acknowledge it. But I feel like that's one of the main things that gets missed. Even with the modern movement, a lot of folks think it's just about policing. It's just about these individual cases. And to me, at least, it's never just been about one case or, however many cases there have been, or just, the times that people die. People are always calling for justice for individuals, which is important.
Yeah.
But, something else that I've heard people say, and I agree with, it's also, first of all, can you get justice for somebody that's dead? I don't know what that means. What does it mean to have justice? But why can't we have justice for the living? If we really want justice, if people are serious about that, then why are we not committed to taking the steps to address the systemic issues, you know, to ensure that everybody has education, to ensure that everybody has
because the
healthcare.
systems have to die and they don't want to.
Exactly.
Because
yeah,
the
that's my view.
systems don't want to die.
Yeah.
The systems, you know, in South Africa, they used to say when the races got worse, they would say, what we're seeing are the death pains of a dying reality. And systems that are bad, that when they start dying, they jerk and it's hard and they can hurt you. You know, an animal when it's dying is very dangerous.
Yeah.
And so in order for that conversation of life means other stuff has to die.
Yeah.
Right? It means, for instance, if you're gonna talk about Bessemer and black folk down there, you also gotta talk about whether or not in the civil rights community we're gonna accept resources from somebody who's, on the one hand, will take a picture of him giving resources to a civil rights organization and run it through the plant and show the workers as a way of suggesting, trust me and don't fight for your union right. You know, we're gonna have to, the filibuster's got to die.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You know, politics that only includes a few people has to die.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to really start engaging and mobilizing poor and low wealth people. But if you do that, you know, poor and low wealth people now make up 30% of the electorate, black and white. I'm just talking about poor and low wealth people. We did a study that showed that if in 15 states, if just 1 to 22% of those that didn't vote organized around an agenda and voted, they fundamentally shift all the politics. Well, then that means some people may not be in office, Democrat and Republican. So that's gonna have to die, your sense that you own this office, once on both sides of the aisle. So life requires some things to die.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a seed.
Yeah.
A seed goes in the ground. There's a place, and you know, sometimes they used to have those cameras that take pictures like that, but the camera has never been able to take the snapshot of when the seed dies and comes right back to life. When it dies, but it happens.
Yeah.
That seed has to die and then poof, come back to life.
Yeah.
And so, I was reading a book one time on church growth, but the book was What Must Die.
Yeah. Wow.
It was like, let's don't talk about church growth. We need a new synthesizer. We need what has to die?
Yeah.
What in the theology has to die? And I think, Bree, that it's scary. That's why some folk are scary of movements that take no for it, won't take no for an answer. Movements that bring people together that the systems are not comfortable with.
Yeah.
Right? And if you do it well enough, these systems have a history of killing you.
Yeah, that's what I feel like I've been witnessing. Like that's what I felt like the whole Trump era was.
Yeah.
I felt like it was the jerk reaction to, oh wait, things are changing too fast. Yeah. Folks are demanding too much. And it was like, there was just this impulse among a lot of people to go wildly in the other direction.
And to blame it all on Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what Nell Painter said at Princeton? She said, Trump is not he's a symptom. He's the iconography of a too often repeated American reality.
Absolutely.
But Trump also happened because of what Democrats didn't do when they had power.
Exactly.
See, everybody, the Trump, you didn't do this. Trump did, well, when you had both the House and the Senate and the President, you didn't pass universal health care.
Right, right.
You didn't pass living wages.
Right.
You didn't strengthen the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
So that it couldn't be touched. So you can't just blame it on, you have to look at how does Trump happen? You know, how does it get to 70 million people buy into this craziness? And as long as you make him an anomaly.
Exactly.
As long as you say that he's not American. No, he's very much American. Now, he's not all there is to America, but he didn't come from outer space.
That's not us. We don't know where he came from. You know, I watched for years where they would, nobody could run for office on the Republican side without going through New York and getting his endorsement. Right. He was present at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I mean, very much on the scene, and then all of a sudden, I don't know where this person came from. Right.
Or, well, Woodrow Wilson did something the same
Right.
stuff.
Exactly.
One of the first, there have been 4 times in history where a president got elected that didn't win the popular vote since 1877, and every time it was bad. It was bad in 1877. It's bad with Bush 1.
Yeah.
I mean Bush 2. So we have to stop this business of acting as though it's strange.
Yeah. Right.
And then, I was saying to some folk the other day And they say, well, Reverend Barber, you and these young folks, you don't know how to compromise. First of all, compromise, the first word is promise.
Yeah.
But if you aren't, what you want us to compromise with no promise. You just want compromise to make it easy, a way to get around it. And what happens at every stage, you compromise on the things that should be non-negotiable. Establishing justice should be non-negotiable. Providing for the common defense, promoting the general welfare, non-negotiable. Truth, justice, love, non-negotiable. Equal protection under the law, non-negotiable. You know, that's what you're saying in your work. That's what you're doing. I'm not going to negotiate my humanity. I'm not going to negotiate my conscience.
Exactly.
We don't say we hold these truths to be self-evident until somebody wants to negotiate them.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Hey, Black, I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
What I love about the movement, particularly with us having this conversation, is, you know, I don't hear like the movement of young folk today using the term left and right and centrist, because intuitively, you all know, what some of us know, is that language is too puny.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like somebody said, well, he's a centrist. And I asked, well, what is a centrist?
What does that
Somebody
mean?
that only wants half the people to have
Right.
something?
Right.
That language, let's use real language. Let's talk about life. Let's talk about justice now. Let's talk about truth, right? Let's talk about real language that can provide the kind of depth analysis. And I call it moral analysis, moral articulation, and moral activism. And if it's a moral issue, it means you don't compromise it.
Yeah.
Other folk may, but there has to be a group of folk or some group of folk or some remnant that holds the line. I was thinking, I'm gonna do this real quick, because it just came to mind. I'm gonna hip hop for a minute. But so there's, if you heard this, it goes something like this. I don't need to see anymore what you think you want me to see, what you think I want to see, with you just acting out inside your place of church. No, what I need to know is, where are you when it comes to the people who are in the lurch?
Yeah.
Those who are lurching in the midst of trouble and struggle. Really, what I need to see is not how much you claim you love me. What I really need to see is, will you deal with the injustice in the workplace? Will you bring the poor into the nation's face? Will you address those that are hurting the most? Will you stop those who spend all their time doing nothing but finding ways to boast? I need to know, do you really want a healing, or just do you want to keep on being sick? Now, you can do this, but you got to change. Now, you see, that's an ancient scripture, 2,600 years old, Isaiah 58. I just did it in a remix.
Yeah.
But the text actually says there's no way to repair the breach and bring healing to the nation unless you stop exploitation in the workplace, pay people what they deserve, and quit blaming the victims for their pain. I think we got to find a way to do that kind of synergy.
Yeah.
I might do it in King James, which I don't necessarily do King James. I might say it in my way, you say it in your way.
Yeah.
But how do we all get in the same way?
Yeah.
And keep moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like one of the major things kind of motivating this generation, and maybe this is true of other generations, I don't know, but I feel like particularly with this generation, is one, the recognition that we are not the first to fight this. You know, we're looking at how long this has been going on. And if it's not concrete, it doesn't account for anything. Folks are tired of all the flowery language and, you know, promises that don't translate into anything concrete.
We created in the Poor People's Campaign a moral justice budget. We actually presented it to the Congress and said, not only is this budget the right thing to do, it's the economically sane thing to do. And we took all those 5 issues from racism to and addressed them. And it just new incoming administration. We went to them. We met with them. They said, "Would you like to meet with the president, vice president?" Not right now. We want to meet with the policy people.
Yeah.
But because we want to meet. And they said, "Well, who are you going to bring?" I said, "About 32 people." They said, 32 people in the meeting. Who are they? I said, "What are we going to bring? Some black folk from Mississippi, some black folk from New York. We're going to bring some farmers from Kansas and some people from California." And they said, "Well, all of those folks?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, who's going to do the president?" I said, "They are." They said, "What are you gonna do?" I said, "I'll wrap it up." But they're gonna first give their face and their story, and then they're gonna give a policy. It was a new way of doing business. Now I will tell you, the pushback came. "Well, we have never done business like this. Why can't you just come and maybe bring one other person, sit on roll like that?" Not with this campaign, because we have real faces of real people. We believe in the agency of poor people, low people, regardless of who they are. And we have real solutions. And we're not interested in just shaking hands and patting on the back and deciding we're going to do one issue. We understand the interconnected. And we had young folk in the room.
Everybody's always looking for the pattern of like, who's the preacher we can bring in the room, shake hands, come up with the compromise, and he goes out and calms all the people down, right? Like that's what everybody's looking for.
Nobody interested in that. No, and also you're not going to box us in. You know, we have a coalition of now 1,500 clergy in the prophetic council with the move. You're not going to box us in and say, "Well, you can speak about this."
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
I was asked a few weeks ago, "Well, why are you being so hard on the living wage thing?" I'm like, what? I mean, you know, well, didn't Jesus say the poor would be with you always? No, no, that's half of a quote from Deuteronomy. Read the rest of it. Because you won't pay people.
Right.
But and they said, "Well, you know, aren't you're just a civil rights leader." No, I'm a public theologian. I'm doing public policy. I'm trying to raise these moral concerns. And the budget is as much an issue of justice and dealing with systemic racism as addressing police brutality, as addressing voting rights. And I'm not going to separate the two.
All completely connected.
Right.
All completely connected.
They said, "Why you got to go to West Virginia with those white people?" First of all, I didn't just go with white people. We had white and black folk in Charleston, people coming out of the mountains, at the hills of Charleston, also the sidewalks of Charleston, together, fusion. They said, "Well, where'd that come from?" I said, "Well, they were together in the 1930s. You just don't know the history."
Yeah.
They would, please stop acting like this is some nuance.
I want to make sure I talk about something with you before, but no, just before I lose time with you, I want to make sure we talk about intergenerational dynamics and conflict resolution, because I feel like a lot of that has been coming up. One, I feel like people oversimplify this intergenerational conversation.
Okay, what do you mean? Yeah.
Because I feel like people frame it as though the new generation is more radical and the old generation, you know what I mean? And I'm like, no, like we're having the same ideological debates today that folks were having in every generation. Like, I think there's always, intergenerational dynamics.
Sure.
Just like, when the students went and did the sit-in movement. Right. There were some people that weren't supportive of the students doing that. But it's not like one generation is completely, in one frame of mind and the other is in another. So I think people oversimplify it in that way. I think people miss how critical you have to have an intergenerational movement. You have to, in my view. It's about elders, it's about ancestors, elders, young people, and the future. Like, who's coming,
You gotta sit them in the room. They're here, but they're not here.
Absolutely.
Sit that in the room.
So I want to kind of talk about that, because even in my age, like, people might consider me young, but I'm looking at, like, how can I help support people that are 10, 15 years younger than me, know? And so I think that's an important part of it. And then just how we deal with conflict, because I don't know how all generations compare. I do feel like in this generation, we've got to do more around being intentional in resolving conflict. Conflict's going to happen. And I feel like people either avoid conflict, or conflict is treated as like the death knell of something when it's just a part of the process.
You and I haven't always agreed. Yeah. But we agree on the big piece. Yeah. And we know we're better, and our conflict is not about destruction. Yeah. See, that's one of the things about this issue. If I get in the room with you and it becomes a zero sum, all in or all out, perfection becomes the enemy of great. And I see you as an enemy, rather than somebody that's struggling to deal with these same issues. And we don't have to have total agreement. We can agree around some basic agendas and pushing forward. We don't always have to have every tactic agreed upon. Maybe we should not have every tactic agreed upon. Maybe sometimes we should play different roles. I'll never forget when we were in the middle of the struggle here in North Carolina. I went into a hearing one day, and I was all ready to get up and talk about how this voting rights bill, voter suppression bill, would hurt black folk. And this white lady came in who was a part of my Monday. She hunched me. And I said, hello. She says, I'm 80 years old. I moved here from Georgia. She said, can I talk about the race side? I said, what? She said, would you mind talking about how it's going to impact white women? Let me talk about how it impacts black people. I was like, huh? She said, yeah, fusion. I said, okay. And she got up and lit into them. She said, I know you. I grew up with you.
Yeah.
And then when I got up, I said, I have my full presentation on how this is going to impact black people. I want to enter into the record. But let me add. Yeah. And there was something beautiful about that, right? There's something beautiful about us working through issues. Let's let go of this, I can't sit in the room with you unless we, then we are reproducing the same ideology that white supremacy teaches. You can't be in the room with me without you agree. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but I think that Joshua and Moses and Miriam and Asenath have to walk together. So, what I'm talking about now? Joshua and Moses, in the Bible, Moses, Joshua, but then you had Miriam, who's a prophetess, but you also had Asenath, who was the wife of Joseph. Two different generations, but they all understood that Pharaoh was the issue, right? And we ought to be able to walk together like that. And it's yes, it's going to be difficult, but there's something worse than that. Yeah. And that is destruction. Yeah. And that's what's going to happen. Yeah. Because white supremacy, racism, hatred, violence, the one thing we know about those realities, they know how to unite.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you learn anything during the Trump era, if folk are committed to an extreme agenda, you can talk about their mama. Trump talked about Cruz's mama. Now, you know, in our community, Bree, I'm telling you, I know I can be in the same ring with you, but if I start talking about your mama, I'm probably not going to be, and vice versa. This man talked about his mama, but for the purpose of their extreme agenda. And I'd be doggone if I'm going to let an extremist racist be more committed to his agenda than I am going to be committed to my young brothers and sisters. We're not having this false dichotomy. In fact, let me have my cane over there. I want to show you something before we get off.
Okay.
Because, it's COVID, y'all, COVID, but I want to do something. I just thought of this in the moment. I hope Roland and them don't get mad. But see, here's the reality.
Yeah.
We got this race, right?
Yeah.
And it's like circular.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's got to run their part of it, right? Got to run their part of it. And when you out there running your part, I may not be able to run with you. So I couldn't run with Harriet because I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Right? I couldn't run with Mary McLeod. Wasn't there. I couldn't run with Rosa Parks when Rosa Parks said, kill one of us, I'm gonna take down your whole system. Mm-hmm. You think about what she said. You kill Emmett Till, you don't just have to, I'm not gonna satisfy with you just putting his killers in jail. I'm going after the system that created the possibility of his death in the first place.
Yeah.
So you kill one of mine, your whole system coming down. But I wasn't there to do that. But what if, while we are alive, you don't pass the baton when you're dead.
Yeah.
You pass the baton while you're still running. You look at a relay. The person running with the baton, then the other person starts running, almost individually. But there's a place while they're both running.
Yeah, gotta hand it off.
That they connect.
Yeah.
And there's a time that they don't let it go immediately.
Right.
They don't let it go immediate.
Yeah.
They're still running together.
Yeah.
Baton is in both hands.
Yeah.
Now there is a place that the other one has to peel off.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Unless they grab the baton at the same time. And any track coach will tell you, make sure it's secure.
That's a major part of the whole training, isn't it? Is just practicing that handoff.
That handoff.
Yeah.
Bam.
Yeah.
Bam. Right? And that's what we got to do. It's not a handoff as though I'm going to go somewhere and sit down.
Right.
In fact, the first part of the handoff has to be together. Mm-hmm. And running a certain race, part of it together. There's going to be a place I won't be able to be on the front line. Mm-hmm. There'll be a place that I won't be able to do certain things. There'll be a place that I won't even be here. But that doesn't mean I wait until then. I hold on to everything till then. I don't share anything till then.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the final runner in a baton in the race of a relay is the strongest runner.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, could it be that, Bree, like your generation, you're the strongest runners, but the baton has to be passed but properly and securely, right? So I don't care. I do not care who gets the credit. Mm-hmm. I care that we get it done.
Right. Amen.
And we win.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm just so glad we can have this conversation.
Thank you. You made me cry.
It's so good to see you.
Likewise.
I cherish these kinds of times because, we cross paths and then we're out here doing our thing. And,
That's right.
And it's just great to have this moment.
Thank you. And to tell the little one I said hello.
I will.
That's right. Princess or Prince?
Prince.
Tell the Prince I said hello.
I will.
And the daddy.
I will.
All right.
I will.